So last week, what we talked about was basic HTML formatting. This week, what we are going to be getting into is how we can start manipulating the color, the placement, the size of our websites. As we noticed with last week's exercises, everything was in a standard Times New Roman, the font was there, and everything was just in black and white, except for the pictures that we added. Your cascading style sheets or your CSS allow you to start building in that color and really manipulating the design of your websites. So let's get into a little bit of behind the scenes of how this works. Before we do that, let's just review our HTML tags. Some of the things that we accomplished last week were learning P, which was our paragraph tag. We learned about our links, we learned about ordered and unordered lists, and we learned about our heading levels. We also learned that an image, we can't just copy and paste it in there. We have to provide the code to insert our images. What I start encouraging my students to do with web design is make a list for yourself of all of the different tags that we have worked with or the different tags that you think are important for your websites. These are just the start of them, and we are going to go through so many more. Another thing I wanted to point out, your body. This is where all of your web design code goes into. So everything that you want to see on your page needs to be embedded in that body page. If you start putting things into the head, it's going to start creating a lot of confusion. So the body is where everything that you want to appear on your site needs to go. Let's talk now about our cascading style sheets. Cascading style sheets, or we normally just call these our CSS sheets, they allow you to create rules that specify how the content of an element should appear. What I mean by that, we have our paragraph text, or our text, our links, our paragraphs, images, tables, and much more. This is when we can start adding the color, we can change the size, we can make it indented, or etc., etc. So our CSS really helps us to do that. We're later going to talk about boxes and how we can manipulate margin and padding, but for right now, let's just start with the basic HTML tags that we have already gone through. So this is just an example. You've seen this in your textbook. They are taking these H2, that paragraph text, the H1, whatever might be on there, making it a different font, adding a different color, changing the size of it. And this is just how we can start introducing the ideas and the complexity of our CSS sheets into our web design projects. How this works is when we have our website, so this is our browser, it says, hello, welcome to my website. Our HTML, our HTML document, this is one document, tells us things like our H1, our paragraph, our image source, and our HTML, and this is how it's going to appear. When we add the CSS, this is a separate document. It's a separate document entity that we're going to end up linking these two together, and it's going to create these colors. Okay, bear with me. I'm going to give you guys an example of what this looks like. So why we use these CSS sheets? What's really interesting is you can have multiple HTML pages. So let's take a basic website, for example. We're going to have our home page, which we call the index. We might have a secondary page that's called About Me, a tertiary page that's Contact Me, a fourth page that's, I don't know, reach out for more information. Different HTML pages. Our CSS page, we're only going to have one, and that controls all of the colors to make it consistent across our sites. We don't have to go back and format each individual page. Instead, we use a CSS sheet to format all of the pages. So all of our web pages share that same style sheet using a link in the head of the page, or the brain. So we tell the brain that I want my colors to look like this. It requires less code. If we think about usability and user experience, CSS is really important because our pages load faster. Another thing, this is industry standard for formatting text using our HTML and our CSS. Let's kind of take a look at what this looks like. It's really interesting. I'm going to show you this example. Our CSS pages really define the style of our site, like I've mentioned. You could have a website with the same content, and by just changing up the CSS page, it really changes the vibe and the complete ideas of your site. So let's take a look at what this looks like. CSS Zen Garden, this is just I don't know, somebody had an idea to show how we can use different CSS pages to format our sites. As we see on this beautiful site here of our CSS Zen Garden, we have our content, it's formatted in a nice way. Over here, what they have are a variety of different links of how it can be changed based on just changing the CSS. And you'll notice that it is the exact same copy, it is the exact same H1s, H2s, etc. But just by changing up the CSS page, we're completely changing the work, the ideas of what is on our pages. So it's really neat to kind of see how these different sites and how we can just really just change up our different sites based on changing the CSS completely. Same text, same all of the other things, but this is how we control the colors, etc. of our sites. So when we are working with cascading style sheets or our CSS, what I want you to think of this is a document that is just a collection of rules of how we're going to create our colors, to create our margins, to create our padding. They are just a collection of rules that tell our HTML document how we want it to appear. There are 3 different types of CSS sheets. First, you can have a link style sheet, an embedded style sheet, and an inline style sheet. For right now, I just want you to think about that we are only going to be working with what we call a link style sheet. Later on, we're going to get into embedded and inline, but for right now, let's just focus on the link style sheet. Why they are calling it cascading is how the sheets are implemented. Basically, if you have inline styles or embedded styles, they're going to override your link style sheets. That's basically what we need to know for right now. So that's why we're always going to be linking out to this other sheet. When we get into more complex design, we might use inline to really override something that's going on. Not trying to confuse you, just trying to give you the 3 pieces of information. For right now, we're just going to be working with our link style sheets. When we come into our style sheet, when we're starting to type out our code, this is a screenshot directly from your textbook, but what you will have are a series of selectors, then you're going to have this bracket, and then you're going to declare what you want it to say. So in this case, what it's telling us is I want P. And we should all remember what P is. This means paragraph text. I want it to have a declaration of font family Arial. So what that means is I'm making my font family of my paragraph text to be in the Arial font. As we move on through that CSS sheet, we're going to have even more and more rules. So in the next case, we have our H1, our H2, and our H3. We want all of these to be set into Arial with a color of yellow. So in our declaration has what we call a property and then a value. So font family is our property, and then we have our value. So let's break this down. We have our selector, okay, our declaration that says font family Arial, then we have our property, and then we have our value. Okay, so this is just basic terminology. So every time that we want to start our rules, we're going to say what we want our selector to be. Then we're going to make the declaration and identify our declaration by each property and each value. These CSS rules allow you to create rules that control the way that each individual box, each individual piece is presented. And as we start working more in Dreamweaver, you're going to notice how this really comes to play. There are a variety of different styles. We're going to get into talking about boxes in a little bit, but boxes are really an area that we specify that we want to be in a specific color, maybe a width and height, a background, colors and images, position in the browser window. We've been talking about text, so we can control styles for our typeface, which is the type of font that we're going to use, the size of the font, the color of the font. Do we want italics, bold, uppercase, lowercase, small cap, strikeout, etc.? The list goes on and on and on. And your textbook, as you've kind of been going through this, has been giving you tons of different rules for working with text. There's also some more specific characteristics, such as how we can stylize lists, tables, forms, bullets, links, etc. But those style sheets help us to control all 3 of these. So before we get into structure names and before we do anything else, what I want to do is get into our working with Dreamweaver to show you how these style sheets works and how we can apply this into just some text formatting and some image formatting.